Today is March 18th, 2009. We're at the Sykesville Gatehouse Museum. My name is Ann Horvath, and John Forsbeck is on the camera. We're here today to talk to Evelyn Barnes Brightwell. Mrs. Brightwell, can you tell us where you were born?
I was born in Sykesville. Dr. Sprecher delivered me at home. He was a family doctor, and that was in May of 1926. And I lived in that same place, and well, except for after an interim there, after the fire, we had to relocate, but then we moved back. So I lived in Sykesville for 20 years, my first 20 years, until I married and moved to Daisy in Howard County, and that's where I've been the rest of my life.
And you have other family members that live in this area?
Yes, I have a sister, Alice, that lives, I guess you could say it was near Marysville. It's on Arrington Road in Sykesville, and she's 96.
Okay.
My two brothers have passed on.
So there were 4 children in the
Yes,
family. And your parents' names?
My dad was Edward Barnes, and my mother was Molly, and she was Aunt Molly to most of Sykesville.
What was her maiden name?
Hustleball. That's a good German name.
Good German name. So you grew up in Sykesville.
Yep.
Went to Sykesville School.
Elementary and high school, when it was all contained in one building. That was before that fire that burned Sykesville High School. I think that was in 57.
Okay. You wanted to talk today a little bit about the Sykesville fire of 1937.
Yes.
So tell us, how did that fire get started?
Well, it seems to be conflicting reports. Some say it was a chimney fire. Others say it started in the basement of the Forsyth Market, because they stored things down there and the furnace was there. And that was where I always thought it had started, but I've read other reports that said it was a chimney fire that started it. And it was a cold, very windy, but clear October day. But the wind was extremely strong, and that accounted for a lot of the loss, because the wind was blowing right up Main Street. And had it not been for the brick building at the end of that block, which was at that time Dr. Mehta's drugstore, they think the fire would have continued on until it came to something stone or brick that would stop it.
So that brick wall of his building stopped the fire?
Yes, pretty much.
What time of day did the fire start?
I think it was in the morning, maybe mid-morning. People, I think, they just thought the smoke was because people were firing up for the day, you know, and it was a very cold October day. So it didn't, they sort of ignored it for a while, I think, just thinking it was smoke, you know.
Sure.
But it was really a fire that was on its way. I was in the 5th grade at that time, and word soon spread that, quote, Sykesville's on fire, unquote.
Were you in school?
Yes, I was in the 5th grade in school. And they said it was in downtown Sykesville. Well, every kid that lived in downtown Sykesville, of course, was crying and bawling. It was a mess.
They wanted to go home and
Oh,
find out what was
yes, and I
happening.
started home. But the elementary school principal, who was Holmes Lockard at the time, he came by. I was already starting down Springfield Avenue. And he came along in his car, and he told me to get in, that my mother had called and said to keep me at school, which was a very wise thing to do as I look back. However, my brother Ted was in high school, and he got off for the whole day.
Did he go to the fire?
Of course, yes, of course. There was another classmate, actually we were in the same class, the 5th grade, Lee Barnes, and her father was Dr. Barnes, and she lived next door, so she was crying, I was crying, we were hugging. I can remember it so well. So it was quite an experience, really. And 4 families lived in the apartments over those stores, and of the 4 families, 3 of them were Barneses. But none of them were related. We weren't, any of us were related. And the other family was Hayes.
So those families lost everything just about?
Yes. We didn't save anything, not one thing.
There was no time to get
too
stuff
much
out.
of a start apparently, and the fire engine is kind of strange. Fire engine was right next door to us in that little building that you've seen, I guess. It's now an antique place, I think. My mother had a sister who used to say, I wouldn't be afraid to build a fire in the middle of your kitchen floor with a fire engine right next door.
Right.
And when this happened, that sister was out west visiting, and when she came back, she was in for quite a surprise when she saw that, because everything was just gone.
How many businesses were destroyed?
Well, it must have been, well, I can tell you what they were.
Okay.
I could do that.
Yeah, what businesses were
All right,
destroyed?
yes. Well, Forsyth's Market, which is where the fire started, and that was a fairly new business. He hadn't been there very long, because before that it had been a King's Drugstore, I think.
That is where everybody got their groceries, or?
Yes, that was one of the three main grocery stores. We had Forsyth's Market, which was new. The older ones were Harris's store and A.C. Brown.
Okay.
So we had three stores. They were competitors, of course. And then, of course, next to that was, well, sort of beside it, beside it was Dr. Barnes's office. And then they lived over Forsyth's Market. It was Dr. Harry Barnes. And then next to the food market, that was William Mason Jones had a store. And I'm not sure, it wasn't really a general store. I think he was more of a carpenter or cabinet maker.
Okay.
He made me a whatnot shelf and gave it to me when I got married in '46. Oh. I still have it. And so I think it was more small hardware, hinges and screws and things like that, because I remember a lot of little drawers behind him, behind the counter. So I don't know really what you would call it, but I think he must have been a cabinet maker. And then next to him was Happy Keeney's barber shop. Of course,
Happy Keeney.
If you know anything about Sykesville, you know about Happy Keeney. And then next to that was my dad's pool room. And then that next came the drugstore.
Okay.
So they were the businesses. Of course, the drugstore was not, I don't think it was damaged at all. And my dad's place didn't burn, but it was ruined with water. And in addition to the pool room, he also sold ice cream, soft drinks, tobacco, and penny candy. And it was always in little dishes. So the water ruined everything, and of course it ruined a lot of the candy. You couldn't sell it. So he let me have whatever candy I could salvage. And I was very popular at school that week.
Oh, I bet.
Because I had all this penny candy to share. Most of the families had little or no insurance.
I bet.
My sister tells me, I didn't know at the time, my sister said that Dad had $300 worth of insurance. So that did not go very far. My mother worked at Renihan's apple butter factory at the time.
Oh, did she?
Yes, and of course she headed home as soon as the word of the fire reached her. And just as she crossed the bridge into Sykesville, the whole front of the building gave way, and she saw all of her furniture go down into the flames. And that was quite a moment for her.
That. Oh my gosh.
So it was really quite a day. You've seen the pictures of all the hoses that were all over the place. The reason that the fire got such a start was that the Sykesville's engine, of course, was trying to pump water, but the hose got clogged. They were pumping out of the river there,
right.
And it got clogged, and it was just a trickle, and it was no way they could deal with that much blaze. So they had to wait for companies to come in from all around, Westminster, Catonsville. I think there were about 8 companies, they said, that came into Sykesville to battle that. So after the fire, I don't know what happened to Mr. Jones. I don't know that he opened up anywhere else. And of course, Happy Keeney and my dad, they rebuilt and went back. And Henry Forsyth, had planned to rebuild, but instead he went into business with Mr. Brown, his competitor.
So they merged
So
their
they
business.
became Forsyth and Brown at Mr. Brown's location. Happy Keeney, until his place was rebuilt, he cut hair in the back of A.C. Brown's store. I think it was in the shoe department back in the very back. And my dad moved across the street in the stone store, which is now St. Barnabas Parish House.
Right.
And he was there until he could rebuild. And then he moved back.
How long was it before he was able to rebuild?
He was back in by 1940, and this happened in 37. So it's
So-
a couple of years before things got straightened out. And then the end of the block there, that it was never finished any further than my father's part. The part that had been Forsyth's Market and Dr. Barnes's office, that part was never added on until just recently. And I think that was either in 2000 or 2002 that they put the end on that, which makes it so much more attractive than it had been. It's really nice when you come across the bridge into Sykesville and see that. So that was about it, I guess, for the fire.
How long did it take them to get the fire out?
It must have been most of all day. I remember it was smoldering when I finally got to see it. But it was pretty much an all-day thing.
I guess most of the citizens,
jam.
most of the men were there helping.
Yeah, oh, yes. Yeah, it was a volunteer. And, of course, when there was a fire, all the businessmen just dropped what they were doing and run to the fire company. I guess they probably hadn't had that fire engine too long because I don't know what year the fire department started.
Where did you live right after the fire?
Some friends took us in. Their name was Young, Clarence Young family. My mother was friends with Maggie Young. And they took us in immediately. And then we found an apartment over what was then called the Sewing Factory on Main Street. And different ones, you know, just went to live with friends or family. Most of them went with friends. I don't think any of them went to family. Which people just opened up their homes to us, and people from Baltimore sent out trucks full of furniture, and that's what furnished their house. And people just looked out for each other so much back then.
So clothing and furniture, you
Yep.
just...
Yeah, because we did not save a thing, not a thing. The story was told me that one of the firemen rushed in and grabbed a big box and brought it out, and it was full of just old clothing and rags that Mother was going to maybe make something out of. So it was very sad. We all, you know, we were lucky we were alive. My sister was at home when this happened. She had just finished scrubbing floors. And my father came in and said, "Alice, you got to get out. The house is on fire." So she said that he dumped the water out and hung the pan up. And we asked him later, he says, well, he didn't want the firemen to have to step in that.
I guess there were lots of flying embers from the wind. And
Yes, that was what the big concern. They had firemen up on the roofs of whatever buildings they could get on top of just to put out those embers. They said that well, it's a townhouse now. I think some of the embers landed as far away as that. So the wind was really, that was the big enemy that day. It was really just whipping everything along, just feeding the fire.
So after the fire, when your father rebuilt, he had the pool hall and the ice cream parlor.
Yeah, pretty well. The original pool hall had, the front part was kind of sectioned off with lattice work, and then the pool room was beyond that, so you could come in and sit at little tables and eat ice cream. It was sort of like an ice cream parlor and a pool room, but afterwards he didn't do that. He just had the ice cream and stuff up front, and the pool room was in the three pool tables were in the back.
And you never played pool?
No, I never played pool, but he did my first paying job. I was allowed to cook and sell hot dogs on Saturday night to the guys that were playing pool. And I think I sold them for a nickel a piece or something, not more than 10 cents, I'm sure. And my mother taught me how to make, she called it goulash. It was a relish to put on the hot dogs, and it was really good. So those hot dogs, they really went.
They were popular.
Besides, it kept me out of trouble on Saturday night.
I imagine it was a popular place with the kids.
Yes,
On
yes.
Friday and Saturday
Well,
nights,
the
too.
older kids, they didn't let any very young ones in. Just they, they were at least in high school, and they had to be well behaved, or they were out of there.
So your father kept things under good
Oh,
control.
definitely, definitely. And I used to, I was amazed that because he was so gruff, and then, we went into the Second World War, and a lot of those boys wrote to him. I thought they'd be afraid of him and didn't like him or anything, but you'd be surprised how many of them, and later came back and, thanked him for, the way he had been to them and how he treated them, what he taught them, really.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was a good thing. It was.
And how did you meet your husband?
I met him at a ball game at Springfield Hospital on a Sunday at 4 o'clock, and we were married 2 years later at 4 o'clock. And because I met him on Sunday, then that meant I was getting married on a Tuesday at 4 o'clock. And of course, I was not a city girl, but I lived in town all my life, and I married this guy, and all his relatives were farmers except his father. So that was milking time, and I didn't know it, so none of the men came to my wedding, just the women. But my first husband was a mechanic. He worked his father had a garage and sold farm machinery in Daisy. That was Ken Mullins.
And that's why you moved to Daisy. Then.
Yes, yes. And then he was killed in an accident. We'd been married about 9 years.
And what was his name?
Ken Mullins.
Okay.
He was killed on the 4th of July in a car accident. And then I remarried, and I married Bill Brightwell.
And what kind of work did Mr. Brightwell do?
He did TV repair, and then later he went to work for Airbus Service and drove motor coaches. And I ended up working for them also, but I worked in the office. I did drive a school bus for a while, but not a big motor coach.
And you have children?
Yes, I have a son and a daughter. I have a son by my first husband. He was 17 months old when his father was killed. That's Rodney Mullins. And then I have a daughter, Lisa Brightwell, by my second husband.
Oh, okay.
But I've stayed in Daisy all the time.
And maintained a lot of contact with Sykesville.
Oh, yes, yes. Sykesville's still my first love.
You have lots of friends here in
Well, not
Sykesville.
anymore. They're dying off, unfortunately. Two of my best friends, Dolly Hughes and Eleanor White, we were buddies from elementary school, I guess, and kept in touch through the years. And they're both gone. That was rough. And Katie Springer is my cousin. She's about my only contact I have now when I want to do you remember thing, about, or Dorothy Clark, Dorothy Schaefer. She is now. Excuse me. There was something that I thought about that I've never seen mentioned in any of the books in Sykesville, and that is directly behind what was called the McDonald Block. That's what they called where I lived, all these stores that were burned out. I didn't know it was called that until years later, but that was called the McDonald Block. And directly behind that block, like you're going up Oklahoma way,
I know.
was this very large tin building. I mean, it was about the size of a block, really. I mean, it was big. And it was full of feed. The railroad tracks went right along beside that building, and they had big doors that would slide open. They'd unload the feed into there, and then the farmers would come to the other side of the building and load up to take it home. I don't know when they tore that down, but it was there forever as a kid, and of course it was a playground for us to get in there and jump on those feed. Of course we had to sneak in. We weren't allowed in, but when we did get in, we could play on these feed bags, not knowing the danger that they could topple over and suffocate us,
Right.
We weren't thinking about that. And the two men that worked there at the time, one was Jim and the other was Tobe. And they made a mistake of giving us ginger snaps one day. And we found out that these ginger snaps came in on the train with the feed. Apparently it was a treat for them. maybe a marketing device, I don't know. But it was, a big box like that. And this was a real treat for us because we didn't get a lot of sweets when we were kids. So then the big game became find the ginger snaps in that big building, because they would hide them because they knew we were going to be looking for them.
Right.
So we had when you were a kid in Sykesville, you made your own fun. You didn't have videos and television, and you either roller skated or you rode your tricycle, or you made
roller skated on the street.
Yes, you could start up there at the corner. You know where Sykesville Main Street goes up and then makes a sharp turn up Springfield Avenue. You could start there and coast all the way down to my house.
Wow.
Jumping the bumps, where there'd be a driveway or something. And that was pretty much a Sunday thing because there wasn't any traffic, and we pretty much had the streets to ourselves. And Dolly and I would do that many a Sunday. Just get our skates on and start up there and come down. Going back was another story. It was all uphill. But it was fun, and we did make our own fun.
Any other activities like that you enjoyed doing as a child?
Something else I recall that I've never seen mentioned either were the carnivals. And I'm not sure if it was the very first carnival, but the first carnival I remember in Sykesville was held right there next to where I lived, between the station and this big feed shed I'm telling you about.
Okay.
And that was the carnival grounds. And my mother was very good at bingo. We had more pots and pans and dishes from her playing bingo than you can imagine. And but that was where they held it in the very beginning.
Did they have some rides there?
It was actually between the railroad tracks.
Yeah.
I think they had a merry-go-round. I don't think they even had a Ferris wheel at that point.
It's not a big area.
No. Well, all that building wasn't in there. It was just the station was there. And then the feed shed over here, and all that was open ground there then. It isn't anymore. Yes, no, it wouldn't be any room there now. And I guess it was held there until they moved to the school grounds. And the merry-go-round's the only ride I can remember. Then when they moved to school grounds, I know they had a Ferris wheel. For a long time, they were the only rides you could find at a carnival. Merry-go-round and the Ferris wheel. Merry-go-round was a nickel, Ferris wheel was 10 cents. Try that today. Oh, golly.
Did you play in the river at all?
My mother always dreamed of me drowning. So she was very afraid for me to even, they had 3 swimming holes. We had the rocks way up the river. That's where the boys went, and they often went skinny dipping, so no girls were allowed there. Right. Then what was closer to me was called clay bottom, because that's what it was. It was clay on the bottom, real soft for your feet. And then on down the river was called Maples because of the maple trees, and that was deep. So I was forbidden to go there, and I couldn't go to the rocks, but I could go to Clay Bottom if, older kids were there. But I was always told never to go where I couldn't see the bottom. That was what my mother's rule. You've got to be able to see the bottom. Because I don't know how many times she'd tell me she saw me drowning in muddy water. So she scared me of water, really.
Right.
I never learned to swim. But that was that's what we had. They were our swimming pools, not like they have today. And I'm sure they were much more fun. Even with the turtles and the snakes and all the other things that were there, it was good.
What about during the winter? Did you do a lot of sledding?
Yes. There were a few fields that we could sled in. But as far as streets were concerned, our favorite one was there behind St. Paul's Methodist Church. You could start up there, and you had a nice little hill to come around and come down. But you had to have a lookout down at the other end for cars because it wasn't roped off or anything like that.
And you'd be going pretty fast if
yes,
by
you
the time
could
you got
be.
to the
It
bottom.
wasn't a long hill, but it was, kind of a good
steep
drop
there.
there. Yeah.
That's pretty steep.
Yeah, but I don't remember us ever having any accidents there, anyone ever getting hurt. So we made our own fun. In summertime, we'd play hide and seek until it got dark. And it was just, it was a good life. It really was. We didn't have much, but nobody had much, so it didn't matter. My friend said, we were poor, but we didn't know it. Everybody was poor. So that's, and it's true. It's true. But it was, as far as I'm concerned, it was the best of times. You didn't need a lot to make you happy or to entertain you. Or you had your friends and you just did whatever you wanted to do, pretty much. The thing of being in a small town like that, everybody knew everybody.
So everybody watched out
Me.
for everyone else's children.
Very much so. And any adult could correct any child, and that child knew that was bad because that adult knew your parents, and you were in trouble if you didn't do what he said. But yeah, they did. Everybody looked out for everybody. There was, doors were never locked. The doors were left unlocked. Didn't think of, probably most people didn't even know where a key was to lock the door. And it was safe.
All of your friends call you Puzz, P-U-Z-Z. Where
Yes.
did you get that nickname?
My sister gets the credit for that. This is the story I'm told about my nickname. My sister is 12 years older than I am. So when I was born, she, of course, was into reading the funny papers. And I'm told there was an ugly little baby in Snuffy Smith. Mm-hmm. That had all this black hair. I was born with a full head of black curly hair. And its name was Puzzums, P-U-Z-Z-U-M-S. Mm-hmm. And she insisted that that was me in that paper, and that's all she would call me, was Puzzums. So then through the years, with the kids coming to play and hearing that, it got shortened to Puzz. And I think I've had a fun life by being called Puzz. I think it's been more fun being Puzz than it would have been being Mary Evelyn. That's just, Mary Evelyn is not me. And I don't know if the name influenced that or not, but I'm Puzz to just about everybody. I can almost count on my hand the people that refuse to say the word to call me Puzz. They still would call me Evelyn. And my mother would never call me anything but Evelyn. Uh-huh. But my brothers did, and my
they all
sister,
called you Puzz.
Yeah. My father, of course, wouldn't. And I've met a few older people along the way, and to them, I'm Evelyn. They say, "Oh, that's a pretty name. Why do you want to be called Puzz?" So, but not many. And in school, of course, they picked it up, and by the time I graduated, even the teachers were calling me Puzz. So.
Yeah,
It's been a fun name.
Yeah,
it's been a fun name. I'm glad I was Puzz, and I'm glad I grew up in Sykesville. It was a good life.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
You're certainly welcome. I love talking about Sykesville.
Okay. John, any?
We could go on for a long time.
Oh, we could.
I found out when you mentioned Rodney, he did a lot of car repair work. For
Oh,
me.
is that right?
Yeah.
He's doing an awful lot right now
Yeah.
because, it's just unbelievable. I guess
Yeah.
it's a sign of the times,
Yeah.
And
People
his lot is full all the time, and instead of people making appointments, so he can tell them how long it's going to take, he says, I go to lunch and I come back, they've double parked and taken my parking place. They just drop them off, So he's got all the work he can handle now.
I was dropping my car off and walking up the road to Lenny Palmer, who just passed away. And then Lenny would fix me breakfast, and when the car was done, then Rodney or his wife would call up and say, come down and get your car.
Yeah, well, see, his father was a mechanic, and Rodney was, of course, a kid, little boy. He was interested in anything with wheels on it. And he is a very good mechanic. He's never had to do a lot of advertising. It's just been word of mouth.
Word of mouth, yeah.
And I wanted to show you this.
Okay.
This is the building I'm talking about that was back there.
Oh,
See how
okay.
big it is?
That's a big
And
cinder
if you-
block building.
No, it's
Is
10.
it 10?
It's 10. Mm-hmm. I guess that's why it didn't burn, for one.
One of the
being 10.
newspaper articles that I found did mention a feed storage building with a
Oh,
tin
did it?
roof, and that
Well, it was
apparently
10 on
the
side,
tin.
too. And if you look back here, you can see two men in the doorway. That's probably Tobe and Jim. They're probably hiding his ginger snaps.
So that's where you went. And who's the man in this picture?
That's my brother Ted,
That's Ted.
and
And
the
the
dog
car.
is Goliath.
Yeah, the dog is in both pictures.
Yeah, well, I was always taking his picture. My brother always named dogs. He had one named Wheeler, and this one was named Goliath. And he said, you don't name them Spot or Sport because someone might steal them. That's what they call the dogs. So he'd come up with these weird names.
So you didn't know when that building was torn down?
You know, it's a nice little, almost like a park back there now. They have a little fountain. They have all these bricks with names on it. It's very pretty.
Let John take a look at this. Yeah, so it sat right where that little fountain and park area is.
And then, and then there was this branch, this water that ran through Sykesville. That was the septic system of Sykesville. I don't think you want that on your...
Well,
you might
I've
not
heard
want that
before.
on.
Yeah, because
it really was because all the outhouses sat over it, you know.
Right.
And it ran right, you know, kind of came under part of that building, but it was right in our backyard. And
well, that was a common practice in many towns, and it is something that's not often discussed, but the sewage needs were...
Well, my mother sort of used it as a garbage disposal because we had windows across the back that open, and, you know, potato rinds, anything, we just take it and you just throw it in there. It was funny. A girl came home one night to spend the night with me from school, and I was starting to get dinner ready because Mom was working at the factory, and I'd do something, then I'd go to the window and throw stuff out, you know, and come back and do that. And finally she says, Puzz, what are you going to do when the backyard fills up? She didn't know there was this water
drainage area there.
Yeah.
So most of the outhouses sort of sat over that, and that was a natural drainage system for them.
Not many had indoor plumbing. You know, we did have running water, but that was it.
But the running water was in the kitchen, and
that was it.
Yeah,
and you heated it on the old coal stove. Oh my goodness, yes.
Did you have a big cook stove? Or?
Yeah, big old black cook stove.
Yeah, and brought the wood in.
Wood and coal.
Or coal.
Yeah, I guess that was the blessing of the fire because we had hot and cold running water and indoor plumbing when we rebuilt.
Yeah, so, you put in more of those conveniences.
Yeah, yes, yeah. And now you can, I don't know how they did that water. They must have just put a big pipe there and then covered it because it's all dirt back there.
It's all covered now,
yeah. Because there were two big maple trees that came up out of that branch there, and they're gone. So my backyard's gone. We didn't have much of a backyard. And before the fire, you entered most of these places through the back. After the fire, we had, you know, a front door
off the front
right
street.
on, yeah, which it is now. But it really was a good time. I don't envy the kids that are growing up today one bit. With all the gadgets they have, they're still missing an awful lot. You know.
Do you remember much about your grandparents?
No, I only remember one grandmother and one grandfather, and the grandmother was my mother's mother, who was German, so I could hardly understand her.
You never learned any German?
No. And my father's father, he was a school teacher, Wesley Barnes. He lived in Winfield.
He did? And your mother, your grandmother,
Henryton.
She lived in Henryton. So she had come directly from Germany.
I'm thinking so.
If
my sister probably would know that, but I was little when she died, and I wasn't very old when my grandfather died, so I really
Didn't get to know some of those people very well.
No.
How about aunts and uncles?
Well, my mother was one of 7 children, so I had aunts and she had one brother. All the rest were girls. And my dad had a sister and a brother. I think that's all. No, 2 sisters and a brother. 2 sisters, Aunt Claire, Aunt Leslie, and Uncle Emery. And my mother had Margaret, who they called Maggie, Sadie, Maud. These are old-time names, aren't they?
They are, but they're pretty names.
One they called Aunt Dick. Her name is really Nora, but her father had wanted a boy, and they called her Dick all the time. and Annie. They're all old-timey names. But the uncle was Fred. He was named for his father, Frederick Hustleball. That is the name. I always said, huh?
You know what it means?
No.
Hazel tree.
It does.
Hazelbaum.
Oh, be darned.
Hazelbaum.
Really? Oh, that's not too bad.
No, that's nice.
I always said my mother married my father for his name.
Or a simple name after.
I wouldn't blame her.
Well, with a name like Furchbeck, I'd pick up on the German.
Oh, okay. Oh, gee. Oh, my, it was...
Did your mother have any of those German traditions in her cooking and things that she did
No.
that you can remember?
No, not that I can remember.
Uh-huh.
Alice might remember some, but I don't remember any.
Sometimes some of those cooking and
Yeah,
sewing and family
right,
traditions
right.
get passed down, especially among the women.
Yeah.
But,
The dumplings and the sour beef.
right.
Pork roast,
I do remember her doing dumplings a lot, so that may have come from that. We
Yeah.
had dumplings and bean soup, and we'd have dumplings and a lot of things. Because
So-
I didn't like them, just like doughy stuff.
didn't like-
But my father loved them, so we had dumplings. I do remember that.
And the Barneses were, his parents were probably farmers?
Well, his dad, like I say, was
Yeah.
a school teacher, and I don't know a lot about
The ones before?
about his family, other than his brothers and
Uh-huh.
his father, his brother and his sisters and his father. They lived right there in Winfield.
Mm-hmm.
And,
One of their daughters must have been Wanda. Do you know Wanda Barnes?
no,
Mm-mm.
don't know Wanda.
There's a lot of Barneses in Carroll County.
Yes,
It's
there
hard
are.
to
Yes,
connect
there's
some
some
of
in
them.
Howard County too,
Yes.
and a lot of them aren't related. It's strange.
Well, they may be related, but
Way
perhaps
back.
it's back.
Mhm.
They've lost that connection. Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah.
I never found any that we were related to.
Wanda Barnes I met indirectly through Ann,
Barnes.
and she shared a lot of genealogy stuff with me, and
Mm-hmm.
she did a wonderful study in the Harrison family. Who all, a bunch of Harrisons live around me.
Oh yeah,
And
it ought to be Harrisonville instead of Woodbine, I think.
but she traced the Harrison family back to 1730.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everybody in the Woodbine area is related to them one way or another.
Well, I think you're right, and I think with the Molnickses, we had this one aunt in the Molnicks family, and if she talked to you long enough, you were going to be related to her sooner or later. There's somebody's uncle's sister on
the
on
Molnick-
Papa's side,
that
or
is
on
a-
Mama's side, it always was.
That is a family that did intermarry with lots of the other local families.
Yeah.
So I can
Yes.
appreciate that.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was...
Molnick's is a very common name in this area. Not quite as common as Barnes, but
Yes,
common.
that was my first husband. He was always kissing these girls and telling me they were his cousins, so I learned the family real quick. She is not your cousin. Yeah, that's the trick he played. No, that's my cousin. Yeah.
Cousins.
Yeah,
Kissing
right. I
cousins.
know about that.
So you had to figure out these family relationships
I
a
did
little bit, didn't
indeed.
you?
I did indeed. He wasn't going to fool me anymore. But, we were only married 9 years when he was killed in an accident, and my son was 17 months old. That was a rough time.
I bet that was a rough time.
So-
And it was a car accident?
I was like 29 at the time. He raced cars, stock cars at Condon Speedway. You familiar with that over in Woodbine? I think it was a dirt track, and they had stock car, and it's 4th of July. And he did fine at the race, but he was on his way home, and a drunk driver ran him off the road, and he hit a tree, and the tree crashed down on the cab right where he was sitting, and he died before he got to the hospital. So it's a date you can't forget when it was the 4th of July. you
Yeah,
know?
well, those are dates you don't forget anyway.
No, well, that's true.
But-
My second husband died with cancer, so I'm not going to try for number 3. Nobody wants to be number 3.
You might be surprised.
You never know. Never
I have
know
a
what
very
life's
good
in
friend,
store.
and I'll settle for that. We do just fine. He's a retired Methodist preacher, so I've had a variety of men. Well, it doesn't sound good, does it?
You've had some wonderful
I've
men.
had some very, very wonderful men, yes.
Yes.
And this guy, retired preacher, he was our preacher at one time at Lisbon, back in the 60s. I knew him then.
So you go to the Methodist church there.
Yeah. And I was active in the Methodist church here when as a youngster. Had perfect attendance Sunday school for
Which Methodist church did you go to?
St. Paul's.
St. Paul's.
Yeah, on Main Street.
Yeah, right on Main Street.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that's one. Yeah.
It's
a very pretty church.
And then, of course, right next to that was Ken's, where all the teens went. I don't know if that's covered in any of the history or not. Ken Barnes had a little store there on the corner, and he had a little side room. It had Nickelodeon in it, jukebox. So for a quarter, you could buy a nickel Coke and then play 4 songs. And if we all had a quarter, we could almost have enough music all night to dance.
Oh my goodness.
And he sold ice cream and sundaes and stuff on the other side, and some jewelry, and it was sort of a confectionery store. And they lived in the back. His wife was Marie. And we'd go to Ken's on Saturday night. It eventually we had another name for it. We called it Tee-Hee's Nightclub, because when Mr. Barnes left, it was more of a tee-hee, like that. So it became Tee-Hee's Nightclub or Ken's. But that was the only thing in Sykesville, really.
That was a popular teenage thing.
Yeah, that and the movies that was it. I don't know how the kids survived today. They got so much they can do. I couldn't make the choices. But yeah, Ken's was a place to go because some of the Strawbridge boys would come over.
Right.
You're familiar with that.
Yes.
And they were the best of guys. They really were. I'm telling you, if you got invited to a party at Strawbridge, you'd even go with a boy you didn't like just to go to a party at Strawbridge.
Well, tell me about those parties.
Well, they had a cotillion. Is that
Uh-huh.
what they called it? Pavilion, I guess. Anyhow, they had a nice place where they would have Halloween parties and I guess a Christmas party. Halloween party was sort of the biggest thing because it was a lot of fun with the games.
Because you got dressed up,
Yeah.
costume.
And they would come get you in the station wagon and take
Okay.
you and bring you home. And it was well chaperoned, and it was just great. And you just wanted to. And I had a girlfriend that lived near there. Her last name was Ruby, and they lived near Strawbridge Home. And if you couldn't go to a party there, you tried to go home with her because the boys came to her house.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
The Rubies lived there in that area.
Yes, Virginia, my friend, she's still there. Her name is Maskell. Her married name, but she's still on the family property there. And her sister did live next door, but she sold and went to West Virginia. But that was a big family too, a big family.
The Rubies was a big family.
Well, girls and boys. Yeah, nearly every graduating class had a Ruby in it for a long time.
I'm sure.
But she was the youngest in her family, and I was the youngest in my family. So, and we went to school from first grade through graduation. Don't have too many friends that do that anymore.
No.
People
Now they
just
break
don't
them
stay-
up into
They don't stay in one
elementary
place
and-
anymore. Yeah, but
middle and high school.
in our class, we were a class of 43, and we only had 39 members in it. Because a lot of the boys had gone off to war. They quit school and joined up. So we had 13 boys in that class. So
and the rest were girls.
yeah, and it was good. And we have a reunion every year now because we're dying off. So we meet at the Harvest Inn the second Thursday of June at 1:00. It's a standing thing now, and I send out postcards to remind them. And we get a handful. I guess at least a third of the class, maybe probably more than that, have died. And a third were never too interested, and a third show up. So we do okay. It's getting smaller each year, but we still get there and have a good time. And then I guess Virginia is the only one. No, there's a boy, Dr. Loper, Kenneth Loper. You maybe have heard of him because he was here in Sykesville a long time. I think he started in first grade with us and went all the way through. But some of them joined us in high school.
As people would move in and move.
And as the smaller schools were only elementary.
Right.
You know, and they would have to, they'd have to come to Sykesville for high school. Like Gaither.
Okay, they had it in elementary school only.
There were several, I remember 3 or 4 that came into Sykesville from Gaither and different places.
Woodbine too.
Yes, you're right. Well, there you go, Woodbine.
Depending on which side of Woodbine Road you lived on.
Oh dear, have you lived in Woodbine? Not all your life, because your mother was in
40-some years.
Baltimore. 40-some, okay. Well, I've been there 63 in October, I guess it'll be. So, I guess they'll carry me out of there. I don't plan to move anyplace. I've got a little house. I don't have these big McMansions. They're building them all around me, but I'm sitting there in my little house. Yeah. Okay, well, I guess I've told
We're
you.
just about out of tape.
All right.
Oh my, has that been on all the time? I thought it stopped when I stopped talking
Well, I
about the
lie
fire.
sometimes.
I thought, why is that light still blinking? Well, anyway, we were talking about Sykesville, so that's good.
We were talking about, you didn't say anything bad.
I didn't reveal any deep, dark secrets.
Nope.